Hello, guys. Welcome to Indiana Sports Connection. We have a huge game tonight between the Hoosiers and Northwestern Wildcats. Let's get this stupid music off of here and let's get right into talking about. But first off, let's talk about some of the games last night because I was watching Minnesota. I'll tell you, I hate, and I'm sure you guys feel, let me get your comments up here. So, because today it's going to be a real casual episode. Obviously, we have, Obviously, we have the big game with Northwestern at Northwestern tonight for the Hoosiers. This could not be any more of a must-win game for Mike Woodson if he wants to keep his job here. Because if you just look at the schedule going forward, this is going to get so much more difficult. But let's talk about a couple of the games last night. Ohio State, this is what I hate about Peacock, because I was watching some of this game heading into halftime. Bruce Thornton hits a big three. This game was 25-41, and Bruce Thornton hits that three at Mackey Arena right before halftime, making the score 28-41, and Ohio State climbs right back into the game, going from 25-41 to going up a point. I believe it was 52-51. I was just rewatching the end of that game, but Ohio State gets it done. And look, Purdue had won 7 in a row. They get the loss there. I don't think this Purdue team, obviously they are not like the elite Purdue team of last year. I don't even think last year's Purdue team was an elite team just because I think they were too reliant on Zach Edey in the end. But Purdue takes a loss. And look, there's one guy on the channel who's always because he was telling me Ohio State is not a garbage team. They're not a garbage team. Well, maybe they're not a garbage team, but from how they've played so far, they lost to Indiana. They're in the bottom 3 in the Big Ten. So they get the win against Purdue. And then the other game, Iowa, and I'm watching this Iowa-Minnesota game last night, and I'm thinking, like, Iowa, they did not play defense like this when they played against Indiana. And that's just all there is to it. Iowa's defense against Minnesota. Minnesota was just dictating everything they wanted to do on offense. They were rebounding. And Minnesota's ball movement, they were getting a lot of open shots, wide open shots on Iowa. I didn't watch that game all the way to the end. I fell asleep, but I was just really kind of surprised how Iowa was not showing up in that game. What did the final score of that game end up being there? But, we take a look at, there's a really good article that Alec Bozich put out that I was just reading through. And so we'll share a little bit of that on here. I'm trying to make more live episodes where it's more of like a casual podcast. We can talk more freely and explore more like deep ideas through. What is up, Ryan Fulton? But these just give me more of an opportunity to explore some of these things, because Mike Woodson, talking about the game tonight, 0-4 against Northwestern. And I know one of those games where they lost was one where he benched, I believe, like 4 players. That was like one of the only times, if you remember, that he reprimanded people on this team, and he benched like 4 guys for, we don't even know what they did, but they did something. And that was back in the days when we were still on the believing train when it comes to Mike Woodson. But so, I just thought this write-up Bozich had about, because, Northwestern, they are not a super deep team. Barnhizer on the pick and roll is highly utilized on this team. Barnhizer and Martinelli shooting from the outside. That's where Northwestern, they don't have like a third scorer. I think they have more scorers than Ohio State does, because I feel like Ohio State really plays a different way and plays really stupidly, and then only like Thornton on Ohio State can score. They have Martinelli and Barnhizer. Ty Berry was put on the bench after the game. He was benched for Saravino after one game. But Ty Berry was a guy that I think he had an injury last year, I remember. So I don't know. I don't watch enough Northwestern basketball, but Ty Berry is just fallen off entirely. And so Barnheiser and Martinelli, these are the guys who are going to try to get ball movement and try to hit shots from the outside. They have struggled. I mean, a line score that I just looked at recently, they have struggled. I think they were like 5 of 17 in their last game. Barnheiser was, and Martinelli was like 4 of 15 in that game. So that is key. Indiana has to play defense on these guys on the outside and then just get up on guys on defense. I mean, that's going to be the key. They're not going to have, obviously, Ballo should be able to dominate down low. And that's the next thing we're going to go into talking about. Will Malik Renew come back for this game? Nobody knows what's going on with him. He could definitely be back in the starting lineup. And so what happens there? Does Mackenzie Mgbako get benched? This guy has been losing so much confidence. So what can you do? And I did hear Mike Woodson in the press conference he did yesterday talking about the Northwestern game saying, look, and I get it. You're a coach. You're there to win games. You cannot have a guy like Mgbako go out there, miss 4 or 5 shots early in the game, completely take himself out of these games entirely, and then think that you're going to continue to play and continue to. I don't really know what the answer is for Mgbako. I mean, what do you do to get out of a slump? You know, I was always a lot more of a baseball player, and so baseball slumps are psychological. Basketball slumps, probably people think they're not as much psychological, but they are. And I really don't know where he goes mentally. I'll tell you what, they're playing in Illinois today. You know, maybe get yourself some marijuana and a taco over there and just calm yourself down so that you can hit some of those outside shots. But don't let Mgbako, do not let the entire game just rely on whether or not you're shooting well from the outside. Okay? That's what I think a lot of these guys need to be challenged to do other things on the court. Kanaan Carlyle as well. And we'll talk about him next. But Mgbako, how many good passes have you ever seen Mgbako make in an Indiana uniform? That actually just came into my brain right now. And I can't really tell you that he's ever made a good pass or done anything. When he drives in, it's predictable. He's going right to the rim. He gets a lot of contested shots blocked, and he misses a lot of shots right around the rim for a guy that's 6'8" and built as, like, if you get up close and stand next to this dude, he is huge. So it's all a mentality thing. I mean, he could definitely, last year I was at the Minnesota game, and in that game, for some reason, he just started rebounding the hell out of the basketball. I think he had like 6 offensive rebounds in that game at home last year. But when you see him actually, and that was a game where maybe he had an advantage on some guys and he was able to, but you got to bring that type of intensity every single night, not just when you have maybe a physical advantage or you feel like, because look how he played early on against the weak competition. He scored like 31 points in the first game of the year. In the first 5 games, and I was saying this over the summer, this is a dude who should be scoring 20 points a game for this Indiana team. There's no reason he can't do it. It's all a mentality thing. The coach and the coaches have to help this guy to get out of this, and they have to challenge him to do other things. Get an assist, okay? How about you get excited for somebody else besides yourself, okay? Make a nice bounce pass down in the lane or a give and go with somebody or something like that, and get yourself involved with other players. That's where you see him. He struggles. He misses his first 4 shots. He puts a towel over his head. He goes to the end of the bench. And even in the rest of the game, and I heard Rick Bozich just saying this, is he'll be not really engaged even as the game's going on. Goode makes a 3 or Miles Rice makes a play and other guys on the bench are excited and he just doesn't look that engaged. So he's got to get out of his own way when it comes to all that stuff. So enough about Mgbako, because the next thing in this game is going to be, whether or not Renew plays. Kanaan Carlyle, he had a kind of a better game, but when you still look at his overall stats in that last game, yes, he got to the rim, and it seemed like, it seemed like he was really feeling himself out there more than anything. He was really pumped up. He made some shots around the basket. Yes, I like that, but I also do not think he is one of our best offensive players. I feel like every time he shoots a shot that he is really taking an opportunity out of Miles Rice's hands to either push the ball or him to figure out the things that he needs to figure out there. And so I don't like Carlyle taking shots from the outside at all. And, I made the video a couple days ago and Tom Crean was talking about this guy, like how it's still in this guy. He was one of the best defenders he had ever seen recruiting him out of high school. So can Carlyle, he needs to zero in on the things he does best. He could score 8 points in a game, get a steal or two, get a couple of breakaway layups. Sometimes when you're that role player on the team, you're not squaring up to just fire up shots. Do what Chris Reynolds does. That's all you need. It's like, do what Chris Reynolds did. He could score 6 or 8 points, but he's going to get a steal here. He was going to get an assist here. He's going to cut to the basket here. There are so many different ways that you can score in a basketball game besides doing what Carlyle does. That's what he doesn't understand. And the coaching or something needs to let him know, like, look, dude, we got plenty of guys on this team like Luke Goode, Miles Rice, Mgbako that could be spotting up to shoot. Mgbako, especially, he's sitting on the bench, and you bring a guy like Carlyle in, he's going to just fire up a shot. Like, that is just part of the coaching or the culture or something that has to come around where he has an understanding that he is not the primary dude all the time. And look, he was that guy at Stanford. I think it was a big mistake bringing him to Indiana because with the role he played there, you can just see this would be impossible. Like, it would be really hard to play, even on your high school team. You're the best player on your high school team. You get a bunch of shots. Then you got to go somewhere else and adjust and be more of a facilitator. And you're not going to be counted on that way. That's basketball. That's development. You're not going to be the best player at every single level. And the more you understand parts of that, the more you can understand that maybe you could have a role in the NBA. Who knows? There are tons of role players in the NBA, but you have to you would really have to focus on what you could do defensively and some other things, And Carlyle, hopefully, he brings the energy. He did bring the energy in the Ohio State game, and I do appreciate that because you got to have the energy in these games. And we know from watching this team that energy has definitely been lacking. And the next thing I want to talk about, if Renew comes back, will Goode sit down or will Mgbako sit down? That could be detrimental to Mgbako, but the bottom line is Mbako's got to put more work in. He's got to. You look at this guy coming in from New Jersey and the way that people look at these recruits like they're going to be this and they're going to be that. Well, no recruit is anything until they prove it on the floor. I think at this day in AAU and everything that how many guys get projected that they're going to be NBA players and just completely fizzle out? I wish somebody was keeping a metric stat on that. Like, how many 5-stars don't make it to the NBA? How many guys do they say that are one and done that just end up not panning out at all? But Yeah, man, Woody got to win tonight to continue making up for poor losses and stay in the top half of the Big Ten. Hell, they beat us up bad up there. And Hoosiers up there start booing. Yeah, there will be a lot of IU fans at this game, Ryan, and it's going to be, yeah, there's always a lot. Chicago is the city in the Midwest that has the most Indiana Hoosier alumni and everything. Because if you're going to work in corporate America and you go to the Kelly School of Business, like most likely your opportunity is going to be Chicago is just going to draw a lot of Indiana fans in. There's always a ton of Indiana fans at this game. The place, it's always a pretty tough place to play. Unlike Ohio State, I feel like is an easier place to play at, even though their arena, I think, seats like 20,000 people. But just here at Northwestern, their fans will be, they always feel like they're right on top of you. I think that's the biggest difference, where Ohio State's student section is a lot more like spread evenly around like the bottom level, but they're like not like sitting right on top of you like they are at Northwestern. But so Mgbako, if he ends up getting benched in this game, could he come off the bench and bring energy off the bench? Could he actually be a role player in this game tonight? Or could there be a scenario where Woody just plays, and this would really show, I mean, too little, too late, but if he plays Ballo to start and then he just brings Renew off the bench and has Renew only substitute for Ballo, that would be just another scenario that I think would work out a lot better. And you'd still have Goode in the game. I don't know if Bryson Tucker is playing in this game. He was out with a something in the last game. I did not get what that injury was still. But so Bozich writes in this article, Indiana struggles against Northwestern and Mike Woodson are well documented, dating back to the 2021-22 seasons. Woodson's first in Bloomington. Indiana is 0-4 against Chris Collins and the Wildcats. The 4 games have all been hard fought, with Indiana falling by 15 points in the last 2 meetings in Evanston. Indiana has scored just 56.5 points per game. And I remember the one that was the most killer was the noon start. That was last year. We lost to Northwestern in a home game at a noon start where they just outworked us in every aspect of the game. And that is the type of thing we could definitely see in this game tonight. Northwestern has a better style of play than Ohio State does. I feel like they have like a better culture there or something. Barnheiser, who's from Lafayette, is going to be fired up for this game because any of these guys that are from the state of Indiana that Indiana did not recruit. It's something I just heard today that, Luke Goode wanted to play at Indiana and was not offered a scholarship by Archie Miller. So, because I think one time on my show I said, well, why did he just not come to Indiana to begin with? And just play with hustle and pride. No more losses by 10 to 12 points to any team. Yeah, we're too talented for that. I totally agree with that. I do not, we cannot get just beat by 20 points or more in some of these games. That is, I believe, what sets our entire fan base on fire. It's the not trying hard, the lack of effort, and then getting beaten in that type of way is where, whether you're at a game, at Assembly Hall, or on the road, that drives our fan base, I think, more than anything, because Indiana basketball fans are like the basketball purist, and we want to see a certain style of play. We want to see Not to bring up Bob Knight too much, but in this book, there's a lot about when Bob Knight first got to IU, how his style of play was not what Indiana basketball was. And I just think it's really fascinating how, you sit here and he's like this legendary coach, and everybody thinks, everybody liked him from the beginning. And it's like, no. I mean, there's a great story in this book where one of his players, because he was not going to allow him to shoot, they were beating Kansas, and it was like a super low-scoring game. And people were just yelling from Assembly Hall, like, shoot the ball, shoot the ball. And one of his players, I can't think of his name, but he comes over by Knight, and he's like, don't worry, Chief, I'm not gonna shoot it. And it's just like, but that was like the mentality, because we went from being the Hurricane Hoosiers and those Branch McCracken teams that we had before, and then Bob Knight ushered in this totally different style of play. And so a lot of people were like, what the hell is this? What is this? Like, this is not what we do. And so sometimes when I hear even like Mike Woodson say, well, that's not Indiana basketball, I think, well, articulate what you mean by Indiana basketball, because there are several styles. We were the Hurricane Hoosiers, and that was a revolutionary style of its time. And then the motion offense and everything was a revolutionary style of its time. We need a coach that's going to move us into the three-point shooting era of its time, like in the same way that that's how we found success in the past. I mean, we had revolutionary coaches that did revolutionary things, and we were on like the cusp of great stuff. Joshua, thank you. I think it'll be a good game. IU should beat like half the teams they play on talent effort alone. Yeah, totally agree with that. Northwestern's one of those teams that could out-effort coach us, assuming we showed up. It should be a good game. Yep. I think Indiana shows up. There is no way. That's it. Bootsy White. That's the dude. That was a great story. But I always love anybody that calls anybody Chief. It just makes for a hilarious story, Don't worry, Chief. I'm not going to shoot it. Yeah, Brian says, remember, Northwestern has a better coach, and that means a lot when it comes to in-game decisions. Yeah, I totally agree. We get overmatched in because we're just not playing a college system. It takes a lot to develop a college system. I mean, I've watched a lot of documentaries about Mike Woodson and how he developed his system, how he really came onto something when he coached with Larry Brown. And I know that's how he got his coaching philosophy and everything like that. But college is just totally different than that. You just don't have the talent. You just can't win with just talent alone in college. You got to have a system, because you may get a talented players here or there in college, but for the most part, you're going to have role players in college that aren't going to ever play in the NBA. Your teams are more about the role players and then sprinkling in like a good talent. I'll tell you, I really think, and I went to a few of the games. I was at the Hoosier Classic when Purdue and Jaden Ivey played on Purdue. Jaden Ivey was like a great talent. But in my opinion, in my estimation, he just like did not really fit into the style of play. I felt like he played outside of what the offense was sometimes. And I mean, there were some times where I could just tell at like the Hoosier Classic, Matt Painter was just getting into it with this guy and benched him a couple of times because he would just refuse to play defense. He was a great talent, but where is he now? He's playing for, the Pistons, and it's not like he's some great star, but I don't know. Just on those teams, I don't think he made Purdue like so much better. If you really think about it, Purdue really got better, and that was, Zach Edey's sophomore year when he was playing there. So, but it was like Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer, guys that really brought in more of like a Purdue culture. I don't know. That's just my opinion of when you make a sacrifice. And you can see that Rutgers did it this year. Rutgers they sacrificed all of their defense to bring in two highly talented players, and they lost a lot of their defensive culture because of that. And it's just something as a college basketball coach, I think you need to have like a little bit, you need some top level talent. Obviously, you need guys that can hit shots from the outside. I mean, it pays to have a guy like Danny White on your team. It pays to have, like some of the players on Michigan State, the guards that they have. It pays to have some of those guys, but you got to have a built-in culture. That's where Indiana, you'd think that Galloway and Leal would be these culture guys, but I think Leal brings that culture. I think him and Goode are bringing it, but I think Galloway, as a fifth-year senior, with the things he's done, the perception surrounding him, and I know Mike Woodson said he's had, a major knee surgery, and Mike Woodson was saying in the press conference, he could take a year to recover from that knee surgery. That's not true. It was not like a regular ACL surgery. It was a MCL surgery. So it's not as major of a knee surgery. But Galloway, he's not been good this year. And I can't believe like so many of these videos I make where I don't even think about talking about Galloway. And I mean, I think about when I watched him as a freshman, when I watched him as a sophomore, and how I thought this guy was really going to develop into something special. He was really going to develop and be kind of like, I don't know, like that Damon Bailey type player when he's a senior that's going to be like that leader. And he is not that guy. I mean, he's out of the casino. If all of this stuff is true, like the stuff he does or whatever, I mean, you just can't be doing that and think that you're going to be the main leader who's going to galvanize a group of guys. You got to hold yourself. I mean, he's got to hold himself to a higher standard. And I don't know if Luke Goode can influence him in a better way or Anthony Leal. And Anthony Leal sells real estate on the side. So I don't know. How important is it to him? I've done some real estate, and it is time consuming. Real estate is a very time consuming business to be involved in any way, because people are demanding. They want to look at stuff when they want to look at it. People want to do with anything like that. So what do we think about the Hoosiers tonight? It's going to be quick. I'm going to wrap it up here in just a second, but yeah, I'm really interested in this game to see kind of like Ty Berry. Is he like still kind of injured? What is his role on this team if he's coming off the bench? Because he could be kind of an X factor if, but, and one last thing, I was watching a podcast yesterday with Tyler Hansborough, and I thought it was really great because he was talking about Indiana, and he was talking about the effort level. And the effort level has to be 100%, because what he's saying on there is like, it doesn't matter if you're a college player, if you're going to a mid-major, if you're going to Ball State, you're going to Eastern Michigan, you're playing college sports, the bottom line bar is like you're going to give 100%. I mean, the fact that we have players here at what is considered to be, dare I say, a blue blood basketball school. I mean, that we have players here playing for this type of a place. I mean, if you're going to Ball State and you're playing basketball there, it should be that the bar is that you're going to give. When you step out onto that court, you're going to give 100% every single time. If the coaches at Indiana University can't convey that to players, because he's right. Watch, like IPFW, they play a crazy style of basketball. I watched they have or PFW that's right here in Fort Wayne. They score like 120 points in some of their games. These guys, They're not getting paid all this money. They are running up and down the court, giving all out effort, and nobody's there at the games. They play at the Coliseum in Fort Wayne. Nobody's there. Nobody gives a crap about them. And they're giving all out effort. And the coach demands it, and that's all there is to it. And they're not playing at some high level school. These guys on like PFW's team would kill to play in front of a crowd of people like we have at Assembly Hall. And I just think you got to keep that in mind. Like, us as fans, we're not crazy people because we want to see the team give all out effort. I mean, I do see people that do want to really rip on Indiana fans still and say, that's the reason why Indiana sucks. It's because their fans are toxic. No, we aren't. Like, the fact that we have, and I started this channel, and there is more engagement in Indiana basketball than there is still with any program around the country. Just believe it. And that's all that matters a lot when it comes down to it. I mean, we still have people that if you bring a number one team into Assembly Hall, I mean, we are a basketball loving state. I mean, Assembly Hall will be packed to the rafters. If Kentucky was playing there tomorrow and they're ranked number one, that place is going to be packed to the rafters, like, no matter what. So the people that really want to say, well, it's the fan, what would it be like if nobody showed up and nobody cared and nobody wore Indiana shirts and nobody wore, then you would sit there and look like, well, that's a toxic culture. That would be a toxic culture to me. It's like nobody cares. Nobody's bringing any energy to it. I know I get super upset, and there's probably tons of people out there like, oh, he's the toxic Indiana guy. And there are times on this channel where I'll get super upset, and there are times on this channel where I'll give them credit, and I'll be dead wrong one day, and hopefully, I say when I'm dead wrong and not, and that's just part of being fans. But, the same with the Ohio State fans. People are saying, well, Ohio State fans, they're so toxic about, how they ripped on Ryan Day because they lost to Michigan. No, their expectation is that they're going to beat Michigan every year. That is never going to leave Ohio State fans' minds, ever. And if it does, then they're in big trouble. And I think the same way about Indiana basketball. Like, our culture for basketball and everything is always going to be that we have these expectations, that we beat Purdue every year, that we're better than Northwestern and Penn State, that we are going to roll over those teams, or at least we should. And these are going to be our expectations. And the second we start saying, we always just lose these games, so we're just, the second we start just accepting it as like normalcy is the second that we really go right down the toilet, So that's just my take on Indiana basketball, because we got to have these expectations, and it's just all there is to it. And that's what keeps the fans engaged. That's what keeps so many of us engaged. But this game, if you look at the schedule after this game, we have tough games. Now, Maryland is a bad team on the road, but that is going to be a tough game because they have Queen on their team. I think that's going to be a tough matchup for Ballo. We'll see. I mean, that's going to be tough. But all of these teams that we're going to play coming up here in the metrics, like Purdue, Michigan State, they're all bunched up like in front of us. So every single game, and we're a 5.5 point underdog in this game coming up. I mean, until we actually prove we can beat Northwestern, and say if we beat Maryland at home, and then there's chances like there, if we could beat Michigan, if we could beat any of these teams, we could definitely then, like, we're 61, I believe, in the net rating. If we beat those teams, we could start getting up there into the 40s, and there is a possibility this team could make the tournament. And don't get so worried about Mike Woodson being here as a coach. If we sleek barely into the tournament with this team that we paid $5 million for, the guy still needs to be fired. It might not happen midseason, but hopefully there are people in charge there that can see, yeah, we don't need to, what are we going to do? Pay $10 million for a team next year to barely get into the tournament? I mean, at a certain point, Scott Dolson and different people have to look around and say, yeah, we got to make a change. But that is my thoughts on the schedule going forward. I tried to come out with a different point of view on Indiana sports practically every day. And I'm sitting here, I'm rambling on and on and on. So I think this is going to be a great game tonight too. Calvin, thanks for being here. IU should beat half the teams. But I think I read that comment already. But thank you so much. And I have got to work on this setup because I cannot see now. My computer's like further away from me, and I can't always see everything here. So thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Indiana Sports Connection. Until next time, stay classy out there, Hoosier fans.